Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Good? Good. My name is Lizzie, and I am the intern for the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. I'm also a project assistant for philanthropy engagement, and of course, I am a student here, and I'm a senior. I'm happy to honor the Indigenous peoples and the environmental justice in this lecture. I cannot begin to express how excited we are to have Seth Thomas Sutton here as our keynote speaker to discuss racial reckoning, activism and justice in academia, the environment, and the politics of knowledge. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land we stand on. Together, we acknowledge that we gather as Hope College on the traditional land of the Peoria, the Potawatomi, the Ottawa, the Ojibwa, peoples past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. As a community, we recognize the ever-present systemic inequities that stem directly from the past wrongdoings. We acknowledge this long-lost history of injustice and commit to educating ourselves and our community as we seek to honor the legacy and culture of the Indigenous people. We ask that at this time you turn off your phones or put it on mute in order to prevent distractions during the lecture. And finally, we'd like to thank the GROW Council, the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, the Office of Sustainability, and the Green Team for their support in sponsoring this program. Thank you to the tech crew, Megan, Confiance, and Freddie for making this event possible. Again, thank you all for coming to this lecture, and I hope you enjoy it. But more importantly, I hope you learn something new that will inspire you. I would like to direct you to the screen to watch Earthwise by Amanda Gorman.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Tinolda Sadek. I'm the environmental justice intern with Hope Advocates for Sustainability. At Hope College, I'm a junior majoring in political science. I also serve as the co-president of Vox Populi, student consultant with the Center for Leadership, and vice president of the Black Student Union. Before we begin our lecture, I would like to introduce you all to Seth Thomas Sutton. He is an Emmy-nominated Métis artist, scholar, author, and social activist. He is currently a professor and chair of the Arts and Humanities Department at Montcalm Community College, where he lectures on cultural criticism, postcolonialism, critical race theory, tribal sovereignty, indigenous art and activism, visual arts, art history, anthropology, sociology, visual rhetoric, and more. Seth is a council member on the Native American Advisory Council at Grand Valley State University, as well as a member of several other Indigenous-centered educational groups throughout the United States and Canada. He was nominated for an Emmy Award in 2017 for his involvement in the documentary series Winua Nijazing, or We the Seventh, and again in 2021 for the 4-part documentary series Shaping Narratives. Seth is a descendant and non-enrolled member of the North Shore Band of Wakanakasing Odawa, or Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. Seth Thomas Sutton is the author of The Deconstruction of Chief Blackhawk, a critical analysis of mascots and the visual rhetoric of the Indian. After our event, there will be a book signing, and our bookstore will have books available for you all to purchase. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Seth Thomas Sutton.
Thank you. It always makes me sound way cooler listening to all the things. I just do stuff. Welcome. How is everyone? You don't have to be, this is fairly informal. I'm a fairly informal fella, so I'm glad that you're all here. I'm glad that I'm here. I appreciate Hope College for reaching out and asking me to come talk about the things that I talk about. So I make really long titles for things in the hopes that by the time I get done reading them, my presentation will be over, right? And it also gives me a little bit of gray squishy area because I kind of know what I'm talking about tonight. That said, I don't know exactly where I'm going to go. I have some things on my mind, and I might, Emily Dickinson said sometimes you have to walk around the house a few times. So this covers most of my bases, so I think we'll be all right. So I would like to introduce myself properly, just as and I'll kind of explain that, but ani buju in the name Malganadak, Mangananimuk Ndejnakas, Mangadodem Nin the Ow, North Shore Band Waganok Single Dawak Nundunjaba, Nimazanak Kazan, Montcalm Gabe Gikino Das Wagamik no gum, Apachigo Miguech Bizendawieg no gum. Essentially, what I introduce myself and why I do that very specifically. First, I said hello, all of my relatives, right? Because we're all related, right? I acknowledge you as my relatives. We're all human beings this way. I stated my name. My colonial name is Seth Thomas Sutton. I am Wolf Clan from the North Shore Band Waganok Sing Odawak Ndunjaba. So I am a descendant of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians from Harbor Springs, Michigan. The Crooked Tree, people over the Crooked Tree. And I told you that I currently teach at Montcalm Community College, which has been my home for the last 8 years in Sydney, Michigan. I'm the chair of the Arts and Humanities Department there. You heard all the litany of things that I do. Basically, it's a small school, and I wear a lot of hats, right? I have a few different degrees, and it helps me out, so I get to cover a lot of fun topics, right? So when Margot reached out to me and asked if I was interested in speaking on a few topics, and she had mentioned that she had seen my documentary and the documentary films that I've been involved in, if I'd want to come and talk on environmental justice. And I graciously said yes, but I wasn't really sure how I wanted to approach some things. I never really thought of myself as, it's funny, these titles, I get activist. I guess I'm a professor, right? That's my title, that's my job, right? Am I an activist? I don't know, I just do stuff, right? I have moral values, and I think that, I try to live to those as best as I possibly can. If that makes me an activist, then okay, I just consider myself to be a human being. I am an author, I publish stuff, that's, a kind of a par for the course. But it's a way for me to also get out ideas and things that I need to express or would like to express in different ways that I can't in a classroom. So I was like, wow, well, normally when I come and talk, I talk about what most people are interested in the book that I've just written. And, it's about mascots. And although I take those topics very seriously, that's not the only thing. That's not what I do in totality. And as I was kind of wrapping my brain around some things with my mentor, it's amazing how the universe opens up and allows things to happen to you when you become a receiver. So I would like to tell you a few things about some of the things that I think about, some of the things that keep me up at night, the extreme heat from the sauna-induced kind of maybe wanderings that I have in the middle of the night. But I will tie it together, I promise. I will try. I have 40 minutes. Typically, my classes run for 3 and 4 hours. So 30 to 40 minutes is going to be it's a test for me. This is good, though. And then I'm really excited about, there's a new project that I'm starting, and I get to talk about it tonight for the very first time in public. So I'm pretty excited about that. Do I do the thingies? How does that? Woohoo! Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm a wanderer. First off, Native American, American Indian, Indigenous people. I know that we have a land acknowledgement. That's fantastic. That's a great start, right? It doesn't do enough because it's just words. There's not action behind a land acknowledgement. Most people, and I'm not saying that Hope is guilty of this, but there are a lot of, I'm just going to say this, and I have some things that I want to say. I don't mean to start anything with anybody, and I don't mean to, there's no offense intended. I'm going to say some things that are on my mind. Land acknowledgements are great, but they're just words. They don't mean anything. They don't. Okay, yeah, we're on this land. Okay, sure, the Confederacy of the Three Fires, right? This is our territory. This is Anishinaabe. But if you're not actively a participant within your reality and where we live in the community in which you live, then again, land acknowledgements, all of these things are just hollow and false. Very similar to the way I kind of approach most of my thought process when I look at these projects and problems. But I love this quote from John Trudell. We're too busy trying to protect the idea of the Native American or the Indian, right? And we're neither one of them. We are older than all concepts. We're human beings. And that, for whatever identity you have, whatever that looks like, the one thing that I want to express tonight with you, I want to connect and communicate with you as human beings, because that's first and foremost what we are fundamentally. We're human beings, right? And I think for whatever environmentally is going on, politically, economically, all of these things that are happening within our society today, I think we're forgetting the fact that we're all human beings and we're not communicating from that acknowledgement of a perceptual reality, right? We have become so isolated in our thoughts that we seem to forget that we all have being, right? So one of the things that I kind of want to talk about with this idea of like environmental justice, like, well, the idea that we all have being, it's probably a different ideology or a different epistemological background than most of you share. Indigenous epistemologies, right, is a spiritual perception of reality rather than a religious perception of reality, right? Spiritual perception of reality means that we're all connected. Everything is connected, right? The other fundamental difference between that is we have a matriarchal society, right, rather than a patriarchal society. That is the typical Western civilization, right? So we have a different fundamental understanding of what it means to be grounded to a mother, right? When I say I'm Wolf Clan, Maing Adodem Nin Da'au, that Nin Da'au part is my mother's heartbeat. I'm a part of my mother, right? It is always that way. My mother is always there. So we have these ideas of like Mother Earth. We probably heard these cliche things, right? Mother Earth and, activism and all of that. But we have to understand that that is where our source of power comes from. So some of these things that I want to talk about, environmental justice, environmental activism, it is not solely relocated to the land in which we walk, right? What it also means to me, the environment in which we perceive reality. That means ourselves, right? We have to center ourselves. We have to put ourselves into balance in order to have solutions that are going to have an outcome that are going to be beneficial. Because how I see society and how I see things going right now is that we are out of balance, right? We don't know, how do I want to say this? Okay, follow me along, right? You bought the ticket, take the ride. So we know that we live in a vibrational reality, right? Vibratory reality. We know this, okay? We know that when we speak, we have, we know that when we speak, we have auditory frequencies that come out and they go off into the world, right? When we think, we produce electromagnetic frequencies that also go off into the universe, right? Everything is about power. Everything is about energy, right? Everything is about energy. Any musicians? Anybody that plays piano? What happens if you hit two keys that are next to each other on a keyboard? It's a dissonant chord, right? They're out of sync. They're out of harmony, right? It sounds awful. Nails on a chalkboard. Okay, so some of these concepts, right? I don't really have a whole lot of time to get into some of them, but some of these concepts of being out of frequency and out of harmony, right? We can apply that to ourselves because we're exactly the same, right? We're just energy. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we need to start thinking and we need to start speaking in ways that are in harmony with each other, right? Because if we are thinking one set of thoughts and these are producing these electromagnetic waves and frequencies and they're going off into the universe and we're speaking and we have a wholly different set of wavelengths and these frequencies that are coming out of our face, right? They don't align. It's a dissonant chord, right? That means that we're off balance, and whatever outcome, whatever tangible solution that we think we can achieve is going to automatically be out of sync and off balance. It's not going to be successful, right? So if we can approach things, I think, from this type of recentering, I think we can start to achieve some of these ethical and moral outcomes that we're all looking for within environmental, understanding. Okay. Oh yeah. So, right, Plato. You could look at that and talk about Platonic theory. Right, that our mind is the perception of our own reality, and if we would like to change our reality, we can manifest that. We have that power, right? If we're going to talk about alternative energy, then we have to understand that human beings are the original alternative energy source, okay? Because we have the ability to change. We have the power to collectively be one entity for that change. Right now, we're in this dissonant, non-harmonious time frame, and much to the video that we were just watching, and I'm sure all of you have anecdotal stories of the winter, the less snow, like there used to be a crap ton of snow and now there's not anymore. All of those, things that we talk about. This is, what we're describing. That some of us don't believe. And I don't like that word, but we're not going to get into that tonight, that climate change is a thing. And I don't understand people that I don't get that. Because you can see it. It's palpable, right? You can feel. And if you don't think that this kind of stuff is true, and I know that a lot of people look at me kind of weird sometimes because I get off into abstract thoughts, but have you ever had somebody which just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, just angry and right? And you can feel it, and then they hang out with you, and it's palpable, right? They are just angry, and then all of a sudden you're angry, and you can't breathe, and you're like, the negative vibes or the negative. Well, that's real energy. That's real power, okay? If you go into the woods, if you're a wood pirate, and hang out in the trees, you can't be upset, right? This is natural power. This is real alternative energy, right? And it puts you into frequency. And I think if we learn to start looking at the world from this perspective, that we can approach problems differently. Because I think some of the ideas that we're trying to get across, it is all, if you're familiar with, the Weenwa Nija Singh, the documentary, right? I don't like pipelines. I protest pipelines, of course, right? But I also know that we are a fossil fuel dependent society, world. There is no way, shape, or form that we can just unplug from fossil fuels tomorrow. We would lose our minds, right? It would be chaos, pandemonium, right? We can do it. We have to make that change. We have to make that decision together to just do it, right? We have to have a collective consciousness that envelops the world. And all that is communication and talking, right? But it's putting yourself into balance and putting yourself into a position where you can actually make change. So the question, what do you do? What are the things that you do, right? And I don't ever want to put anybody on the spot because I'm just a human being trying my very best to, muddle through this world and being the best human being that I possibly can be. And I don't know, I think I fail a lot of times, just because I'm not perfect, I drive a van. It holds 7, right? That's just my situation at the moment. I can't, I would love to have a much nicer, car, but I have a 2003 Toyota. That's what I got. But it's the manliest minivan in all of minivan land, right? So I don't want anybody trash talking minivans. And had I would have known about minivans a long time ago, it would have been a lot better than my pickup truck because you can still get a full piece of plywood in the back of a minivan. In case that's case you want to know what I think about at times. But what do we do? How do we do these things? You know, how do we put our action, right, or our thoughts into action? That's one of the things I'm really excited about talking to you tonight, because the idea that environmental justice, what does that mean? Well, we have a word, God, this is a longer conversation, but you know this word chief that we have, right, in the English language. There's actually no title or position held with the name chief. There's no moniker. The closest thing, we have two words that we could possibly use. One is naganzid, and that's usually referring to the person that's leading the pack in the canoe as we're going down and traversing the water. Naganzid was the person that sat in the front of the canoe, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're a leader. It was just, that's where you were. The other one is ogama, right? And I want to talk about ogama real quick. Ogama usually anglicized is chief, right? But that's not really what that word means. If you break that word down, the O in it is me, I, right? But the oma part is here, and then the aki is earth, right? So really what you're saying is, when you're saying oma ogama, is that who speaks for the earth? It's I who speak for the earth, right? We're talking about an elder position within the society or within the community, but they've been around, right? They understand how the world works, right? They speak for the earth. Somebody has to speak for the earth. Somebody always has to speak for the earth, right? Because it is a sentient being, right? We all are human beings, but we all have spirit. We all share one fact. Well, we share several facts, actually, right? But we all have being. We all know that. I mean, we're called human beings, right? We feel through the being and we act through the human. But everything on this planet, we're just liquids, minerals, and metals. The same, we're shapes of the earth. We're the exact same things as the rocks and the trees and the water and the air. Literally the same chemical compositions put in a different mathematical equation, right? We all are sentient beings. We all have the same relationship to sun, sky, and universe. We all have being, right? This is what we're talking about, is that if we can start to put things from that point of view, in that lens, right, and understand that trees talk. I know that sounds weird, and you might get some funny looks when you're like, don't cut down the tree. Well, why? Because you're going to hurt its feelings. You know, it's all connected, right? The forest is connected. We have to start looking at these things, that what we do to the earth, we do to us. We have pesticides, right? We pollute the water, we pollute the air, we pollute our food, right? By all of these things that we do and that we call progress. And we're told that all of these things have to happen because that's just the American way. That's what progress is. So, but yet we're fine with, we'll clean up the spills afterwards. We'll deal with Flint after, right? The lawsuits go through and people die off. We don't really care. It's not that big of a deal. It's easier to pay money afterwards, after the fact, than to deal with it up front, right? Ice House water up in Morley-Stanwood area, right? They are taking 204 million gallons out of our aquifers in a minute, right? If you're familiar with the story from a few years back, right? They wanted to double their output, their outtake of water, right? It would completely drain all of the aquifers. They were denied the request. They did it anyways because it was cheaper for them to pay the fine than to pay the actual paperwork to do it, to begin with, right? And then when it was questioned, who did Rick Snyder put on except for, his son-in-law onto the board of the DEQ to make these decisions? So they don't have our best interests at heart, right? We live in a capitalistic society, and we have to understand capitalism, their only motto, their only life value is to maximize the profit, They really don't. For all of these things that corporations purport that they care about, right? It's always about profit. It's always about the bottom dollar, right? So how do we combat this? How do we fight against this, right? Because activism in academia, getting an education, learning, reading, right? Being active within your community, of course, that is going to be the biggest way that you can contribute, right? Is to educate yourself. Because honestly, the thing that is going to change is the fact that we become free-thinking human beings, right? Indigenous people have been stewards of the land. Now, right, we also have these things that we're facing, blood quantum laws, right? Within the first like mid to late 1700s, 1737, 1739, I believe, is the first reservation period system in this country. But we have policies that are enacted to specifically assimilate the indigenous populations, right, through blood quantum, okay? And what that means is the treaties were made with Indians, I'm going to air quote it, Indians with a certain amount of full-blooded, right, Indians. But eventually what the math and Senator Dawes they were very, very aware of this. And in the communications, if you look in the National Archives, they're talking about this, that we can beat them in the long game, right? They will breed themselves out of existence. And all of the treaties will then become null and void. Those reservation lands are really not in perpetuity held by indigenous people. They're just land in trust because, right, the government has this thing called eminent domain. And, you know, we have this idea of private land ownership, but that's just a fallacy. If the government says, I want your house, they'll take it. You got nothing to say. The government wants it, it's yours, right? Reservations are the same way. But once we achieve a certain amount of diluted Indian blood, they'll no longer qualify as a federal Indian, right? We have these CDIB cards, Certified Degrees of Indian Blood. Now, there's only 3 things in the United States that are measured off of your blood quality, right? Your pure, your thoroughbred. You have horses, dogs, and indigenous people, right? That's how we have to identify ourselves. That's reality. So these are the things that we need to start thinking about and talking about, right? We want to talk about environmental justice. We want to talk about activism in academia. This is what it is. It's learning the truth. It's learning how to navigate and understand our reality for what it actually is, and not our perceptions of what we're being told it is. Okay, so one of the things that we're implementing at my school is a sugar bush, right? We want to foster environmental sustainability. We want to foster, and did you know, most people coming from this area, maple sugar, right? In this area is the only part in the area in the world that we can make maple syrup, maple sugar. You know that? Yeah, right? Okay, so if you aren't looking at your history, we have the Molasses Act, right, that the Crown implemented, and then we have the Sugar Act of 1764, which was a direct causal set of policies to the American Revolution, right? Sugar was one of the biggest economic productions in this country, right? Did you know also prior to the outbreak of the Civil War, because there was a lot of talk about, well, you know, sugarcane from slave trade and, you know, slave-made sugar, they were trying to combat this. So they were looking at indigenous and maple sugar in particular as like wholly American, as a way to properly and ethically avoid slave trade sugar. But at 1860, at the Federal Bureau, of the U.S. Department of Agriculture took a census in 1860. I'm only going to say there's 83 counties in the state of Michigan, and these are only 3, Cass, Entrim, and Berrien County. 95,000 tons of maple sugar just from those 3 counties alone, right? That is how important maple sugar is to the Anishinaabe of the Great Lakes Basin, right? Michigan only ranks number 5 in sugar production, right? Quebec is number 1, because we don't look at Canada as anything different. It's just a geopolitical hashtag on a piece of paper. It means nothing, right? So we can start implementing these processes and these thoughts in our classes with hands-on applications, right? And this has led to another series of projects that I'm working on because of this, re-indigenizing. And I'm going to actually have to change my intro. The whole post-colonial thought thing, I figured it out. It's not going to be called postcolonialism anymore, because postcolonialism isn't a thing, because colonization is still very much a thing, right? Re-indigenizing. I think we need to change our language, right? And re-indigenize rather than have it being post-colonial. The handbook and then the field notes. I mean, this is a multiple kind of step project, but I want to be able to show how to sustainably take care of a sugar grove, right? What that means to produce your own food, how difficult it is. Do you take for granted how many people use maple syrup ever, right? You just go out and buy it. Who makes it? Anybody make it in here? You make it? Yeah. I mean, that's a laborious process. It is an amazing process, right? It is so philosophical in nature. It is absolutely, it's amazing. If you've not done it, if you've not had an opportunity to go to a sugar bush, do so. You will learn so much about not just the process of making sugar, right, but what it means culturally and what it means to our communities, you know. Some traditional artifacts, New Age, but traditional ways of collecting, right? There's a lot of things, if we look, there's a gazillion books on how to make maple syrup on Amazon, and all of them, and even the United States Department of Agriculture has the same blurb on their website that they all have in the same paragraph of the first chapter. Oh, yeah, thanks to the Native Americans, early colonists learned the art of sugar making, right? But the natives were too primitive and they didn't really know what they're doing, and they threw hot rocks in buckets and boiled sap because we're dumb and we can't figure out how to make things boil without putting a hot rock into a clay pot, because we're not capable of making clay pots that can withstand a fire. Again, wholly other soapbox for another day. But I want to also show that there was an extremely lucrative sugar economy thriving on this continent for millennia prior to the Europeans coming. So it's important that we understand the traditional aspects of making sugar and keeping it. This is one of our sacred foods. And yeah, that's ultimately the best thing I ever saw. And then real quick, because my time is out, and I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to come and talk about some things. I will be doing a book signing. I wrote a book after the fact about mascots. We've had a lot of talk about this, especially since, right, we've been paying attention intently during COVID because we had nothing better to do. But we had 2 of the major teams fall, right? That's great. But why does Chicago get a pass? There's almost no issue with Chicago. But the interesting, not to give too much of a spoiler alert, but there is a narrative and a historical thread, because out of all of the indigenous imagery that we see, Blackhawk is the only historical character to make that arc from an actual person to what we see here as Chief Blackhawk, this idea of chief, right? So I explore that idea in this book. It's a critical analysis of mascots and the visual rhetoric of the Indian, and essentially just visual rhetoric is looking at images and understanding. That's my discipline as far as my educational background is concerned. Looking at an image and understanding how to read it historically and contemporarily, through semiotics, really. So I explore those types of notions mostly, and I'll cap it with this, is because I didn't have an answer. I would go to school board protests, for changing the mascots, and I had an experience. I had an African-American woman yell at me expletives and tell me to go back to where I came from. And I was so confused by the whole series that just happened, that exchange. I had no response. I was dumbfounded. That's what started this whole process, is because when people asked, well, it's just a mascot, what do you care? I mean, we can all say the same types of things, and we all do, but we didn't have I couldn't find evidence of what we were talking about. So that was what this journey took me on. So we can talk about that later. And then also, if you would be so inclined, I would appreciate this. I also, upon publication, started a change.org petition site. This is the address. I think I have almost 15,000 signatures at this point to change the chief, because it's time. So with that, Chimigwetchinwandem Bizendawi Egnongom. Thank you so much for listening to me tonight. I appreciate all of you as human beings.
Anyone has any questions for Seth, this would be the time to ask those questions. We have a mic going around.
I'm just going to put that back up there. It's okay if you don't. It's fine. I just feel like I'm in class now.
I didn't quite understand what specifically you were doing about the sugar bush story. Are those 3 different books you've written?
So, okay, two of the 3 will be published next month. That's the handbook and the field notes. And essentially what that is just going through the process of explaining what trees mean, right? So we have a maple tree is just not a maple tree, right? Different languages. We call it the Inanatig, right? It's the man tree. But when you start thinking about it from a philosophical standpoint, and maybe even epistemological standpoint, what does that mean? Well, okay, aside from the obvious phallic, connotations, what comes out of the spile of the tap, right? The essence of the tree. I mean, so it is not unreasonable to think that you are boiling down the sap, the essence of Mother Earth, right? And that's why it's a sacred food. So now the other one, the tree that made America. I don't know. That won't come out for a little while, and I'll probably come up with something a little bit more clever than that. But I needed it for tonight. So that's the one I got. Right now, the working title is the tree that made America. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Seth. My name is Alva.
Hi.
My question is, do you think that environmental justice can coexist in a capitalistic society?
You had to ask that. Kind of. It can exist. Well. All right. So no, it can't. It can exist in tandem, and it can exist underneath, but it can't coexist, right? Because capitalism and democracy are doing exactly what they are meant to do. People say like, our democracy is broken. No, it's not. I contend that it's absolutely perfect. It is doing exactly what it was intended to do when they wrote it, right? It is to keep a very small, marginalized population in charge. That's what democracy is. That's what capitalism is. Capitalism is to feed the industrial ruling class, right? So can it exist? I mean, kind of, yeah. Underneath, it's got to be, but that's the subversion. That's what we have to think about what we are doing, right? Because we have to not cooperate with them. We have to subvert what they're doing and what they're telling us, right? We have to rebel against that. But we have to be careful because we can't just protest, because protests don't work either because they know that's coming. You have to get a permit to assemble, right? So they know what you're doing, and if you don't, then the cops come. So even if you do get a permit to do a protest, then you go to, Meijer or Walmart or Rite Aid or whatever to buy your poster board and the permanent markers, which, they're also selling to you, right? So, I mean, we do these things and we don't really think about it. They're selling us the water that we, drink at our protest to fight the pipeline. So we have to do things. So the sugar bush, not that I'm like making MCC into like some subversive college. No, not at all. But there are other ways. And if we don't start acknowledging these other ways, these other sustainabilities, then what are we going to do? Because eventually, why maple sugar is so important, one, it's a sacred food, but this is the only place in the world that makes it. What happens when our climate gets to a point where we can't? Because it very specifically, a maple tree can only leak its sap, right, under certain climatic conditions. It has to be below freezing at night and about 40 or 43 degrees higher during the day. It's the only time the sap will run because it's all based on chemistry. And if our climate changes, then that chemistry or that chemical reaction no longer happens. No longer having maple sugar. And it's just going to continue to go north and north and north, right? Which I'm sure the Canadians are completely fine with. But we're going to run out of this resource that we've had in this area for millennia, right? And it's a sacred food for us. And it's so many parallels between the type of economic goods and services that were coming out of this country with indigenous lifeways as well, sugaring, rice, so on and so forth. So, who next? I can call on people. Like, do you have a question? Yeah.
Indigenous knowledge, and trying to hold both of those things in thinking about reaching out to indigenous groups, to partnerships. I wonder, is there a way to do this, or is the history such that it's like better off to not reach out academically to people to have these conversations? And I'm just curious about your own personal take on that.
Okay, so obviously I think due to the fact that we've been exploited for so long, there's a lot of apprehension to want to share, right? But that's not always the case. That's not the case across all Indian country, right? Definitely there are communities that are much more closed off. What I will say about the Anishinaabe, we've dealt with Europeans the longest, I guess, in an idea or kind of a concept. So we've been more matriculated into kind of this idea. So I think in Michigan, and to illustrate that point, a lot of times outside of Michigan, you wouldn't hear that traditional greeting, right? Because this is a non-Indigenous audience. We don't necessarily look at that here in Michigan. We kind of are wanting to share because, see, the thing is, like I said, eventually the blood quantum laws, which are still very much in effect, eventually it's going to play out and there's not going to be reservations. They're not going to be Indians anymore, right? Because once the reservation or once there's nobody of certified degree of Indian blood to qualify holding that reservation, it dissipates. It goes back to public land holding, right? Those citizens are now completely matriculated and assimilated into the dominant white society, right? So therefore, all of the lands can go back to private land ownership, corporations, for natural resources. All of that to say that it's being respectful when you reach out to communities. So, well, not this picture, sorry. But at MCC, you know, we had Kevin Finney, and he's from the Anishinaabe Lifeways Institute, Traditional Lifeways Institute, and he does these traditional arts gatherings and these programs and workshops. So I had him come out to MCC just to to kind of spitball and see, like, this is what we're thinking. Is this even feasible? Can we do this? How do we do this respectfully, regardless if I'm Indigenous or not? The school is not a tribal affiliation, or it has no tribal affiliation. So how do we navigate that, right? So we're running both traditional and one way of, I understand I just rapped about capitalism and consumerism, but, if we make our own syrup and sell it, right? If we're making these things, but we have to be able to sustain for student education, and for curriculum and needs, so on and so forth. But we can run a traditional production facility, and then we can run a commercial production facility. But what that also teaches them is, forest management skills. I'm not saying that Indigenous lifeways is the only way, because that's very arrogant to say, right? There are a lot of things that science and new technology has helped a lot with. So I think that as long as you reach out and you're respectful about your intentions and be very upfront and clear about intentions, then I think most people are okay with it. Because this is, again, we're all human beings, right? These are gifts that the Creator gave for all of us, and it's very selfish to keep that knowledge. It's my personal thought. Yeah, hi. You're welcome, thank you. Mm. Well, let me ask you this. And again, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. Does Hope College have an Indigenous space on campus, like a traditional lodge? Okay. Then kind of answers the question. What does the land acknowledgement do? You're acknowledging that, yeah, we took the land, right? I mean, that's really what you're acknowledging, is that this is stolen land, and that we acknowledge past and present occupation, right, for the people that are still living. But Hope isn't going anywhere, right? MCC isn't going anywhere. Michigan State isn't going anywhere, right? But what you can do is start making spaces, traditional spaces, for folk, right? Doing programs and curriculum that is more inclusive and not just a westernized canon, right, of history or education or academic endeavors in general, right? There's so much more to that. But it also can't be something where it's just, tokenism either. Oh, we have a land acknowledgement, and we're going to put some brown people on our website to make it look like we're diverse, but we're really not, right? We're not putting as much money into these curriculums or into these programs, right? I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying that that's the way it is here. Those are the things that we have to ask ourselves, right? Is the land acknowledgement appropriate? I don't know. What are you all doing to make it appropriate? What are you doing to make it a binding contract? Because that's what it is. It's a living document because it's your word, and that's the thing. When I speak, when I talk why we do traditional greetings and like who I am, is because I have a responsibility to my ancestors, because they're here. They didn't go to some other plane of existence when they passed. They're here. That energy stayed here. So they're with me, and I have to have responsibility for the things that I say, the things that I do, and how I carry myself, right? If you can start asking yourself those questions and what you're doing, then it's enough, or at least it's a great start, is kind of my point. Sorry.
Don't you think it's good to like at least have the conversation? And sometimes in acknowledgments, don't you feel like they have opened up the door to some conversations that maybe
Absolutely.
a really white institution might not have?
Absolutely. Oh, I think they're great. All I'm saying is that with them by themselves as a standalone thing, it's just a blurb that goes on the bottom of a program, right? It's just a little passage on the front side of a web page. It's something that Lindsay said at the beginning of a presentation. I'm not saying that they're worthless. They're not. They have value. But it's what we do with it afterwards is what really matters. You know, but you have to start the conversation somewhere. I'm not going to disagree with you. That you're 100% right. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have a responsibility to your ancestors.
Mhm.
Kind of answered the question that I had, but like having abstract thoughts, being passionate and confident in your identity, how do you share that with the rest of the world in confidence and
You're not saying that I'm confident in who I am, are you? I'm kidding. No, I'm not. No, I am like shaking limp noodle. I'm sorry, so say that again?
basically having abstract thoughts and like I feel like what you said today, a lot of people wouldn't be receptive. There are crowds that aren't receptive to this.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people that don't like what I have to say. Yeah,
So
a lot.
how do you continue to keep doing that? I don't know.
I'm compulsive. I have a problem. No, I'm a teacher. This is what I do. I don't look at my profession as any different than like the clergy, right? It's a calling. Some people are meant to be teachers. I don't know what else I would do if I didn't do this. But see, the thing is, I don't consider myself an artist. I don't consider myself all of these things. Those are just byproducts of like what I feel compelled to do. If I want to be the change that I hope, you know, that I can inspire, then I have to lead that way, and I have to be able to live my life that way, because I can't sleep with myself if I don't. You know, I can't. I wouldn't be able to live with myself that way. And it's not that I'm morally superior to anybody. No, not at all. But that's something that it's just in me. I don't know how to describe it, and I'll always do it because I have a voice. You know, I don't know if until people tell me to shut up and that I'm not relevant anymore, because I think about that all the time, standing in front of class. You know, I make Golden Girls and MASH references because that's my generation, which don't knock the Golden Girls because it's awesome. The Golden Palace, have at it. I'm not relevant. I'm old. I'm over 40, right? So maybe the answers that I have aren't what we need. But maybe by fumbling through my kind of ramblings, somebody can be inspired by what I say and take it on and move what I don't know how to think through yet. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. It's a tough question, damn. No? All right, I'll leave you with one final thing. Oh, yes. Yes. Oh. Holy wow, that's exactly what I was just going to say. I'm dead serious. That's because it's on the itinerary. No. Yeah. Okay, so what's one thing that you'd want to learn? Okay, so does anybody speak Anishinaabe in this room? All right, we're all going to learn. So say a young, Wamazin. A young Wamazin. There you go. You are all fluent speakers. So we would say, we don't say goodbye, right? We say, Bama pi minawal gigawabaman. I'll see your light again later, right? Because we acknowledge each other as spirit beings, right? But then we would also follow that up with saying a young Wamazin. Anglicized, that means be careful, right? Be careful, right? Which is something that in English language we would say, often. All right, see you later, be careful, drive safe, whatever, be safe. We say that kind of stuff. I say that to my kids all the time, right? So a young Wamazin is to walk with intent, really, right? Now you can apply that to being careful, right? Generally speaking, but if you go down in layers of meaning, what does to walk with intent mean? Watch where you step, watch what you do, watch how you carry yourself, watch how you leave your imprinting in the world, right? Be cautious, be cognizant of the things that you say, the things that you do, and the things that you think, and how you act as a human being. That's to walk with intent, because if you don't have intention in your life, you're missing the point, right? Maybe that's harsh. Maybe you're out of balance, right? And you need to figure out how to recenter yourself, but you are missing out, right? If you aren't intentful in your actions, the things that you say and the things that you do, those mean things, right? To say that I'm against this thing, rah, right? But then it's not convenient for me today, right? That doesn't work. You don't have to be, a raging nut over here all the time, right? But okay, so if this is the thing that I can't focus all of my energy on right now, what are the small things? What can you do to make the small steps towards change, right? Walk with intent. So, young Wamazin. That's what I got. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Seth, for your wonderful lecture here today. I especially enjoyed hearing about the power of our words and the even greater power of our actions. Stories like this really push us to advocate for ourselves and those around us. So thank you again for being a voice of our community and our humanity in general. And thank you to everyone for spending your Wednesday afternoon with us. I hope you are able to take away something new that will empower you in your journey of justice, faith, race, disability, and identity, both on our campus and the world. Please remember that there's a book signing right after this, and like Seth said, Ayang Wamazin, everyone. Yeah.